Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you are new around here, my name is Cera. I'm a certified life and business coach and owner of Intuitive Edge Coaching in Los Angeles, California. I help heart-centered service providers, creatives, and spiritual practitioners build the lives and businesses of their dreams without sacrificing their values or selling out. And today, the video I have for you is something a little bit different than some of the things that we've talked about on this channel. This is a sneak peek at a workshop I taught in someone else's coaching program. This is a class about codependency and fantasy love addiction. And this is the type of work that I work with people on in life coaching a lot. But it also does have a lot to do with business because business is just relationships with lots and lots of people. So if you struggle to form healthy romantic partnerships, those same patterns are showing up in your business and showing up in your business relationships. And so I wanted to share this here for anyone who needs this information. But I also kind of think everyone needs this information because even if you feel that you're not a person who struggles with codependency or with toxic relationship patterns in your personal life, you definitely know someone who does. These patterns are very, very prevalent, and it helps for us to understand them. If you are someone who struggles with either one or both of these things in your personal life, then they are also showing up in your business life. And hopefully this will shed some light on some of what you have been experiencing or going through, maybe in a different way than you've heard it broken down before. You will also notice there are a couple of cuts in this video. I cut out obviously the part where the host is introducing me. There's a middle section where I go into a Q&A and I remove that. And then there's a section at the end where it feels like I end kind of abruptly and I just kind of say bye. And that's because we moved from the lecture portion into a Q&A. So I removed everything where other people are speaking or on camera so that you don't get access to anyone who is in this workshop when I taught it and you're just seeing me teach. So that's what those cuts are. And I wanted to make a little introduction to kind of give some context to what it is that you're about to watch. I also want to invite you, if this material is interesting for you, I want to invite you to a brand new workshop that I'm teaching on March 25th, 2024, if you're seeing this before that date. It's called Boundaries for Business Owners. And if you have struggled with codependency or people pleasing, if you've also struggled with fear of visibility, or you struggle to set and stick to your pricing, if you struggle with scope creep and overgiving to your clients, then this workshop is going to be incredibly helpful for you. I'm not just going to teach you about what boundaries are in a way that I think is really different than what you might have heard before, but I'm also going to be giving you tools and techniques that you can use to help restore you to healthy boundary function when you notice that you're operating without healthy boundaries in your work. So the link for that will be in the show notes. It's on March 25th. It is $297, but there's also a 4-payment plan. And I would love to see as many of you there as possible because this information is incredibly valuable and it is frankly life and business changing. Many heart-centered practitioners and providers struggle with keeping, setting, and maintaining healthy boundaries with the people in our lives, and especially with our businesses, because we want so badly to be of service, but we cannot do that when we are giving in a way that puts us at a deficit. So I hope that you come to that workshop. And if you register after the date, you will still get a replay. You can have a download. It's yours to keep when you sign up. So the link for that will be in the show notes. All right, I am going to close myself out here and let you get into watching this class on codependency and fantasy love addiction.
Before we dive into this conversation is just a quick grounding. So I just want to invite you to, if you're sitting on the floor, put your feet flat on the floor. If you're sitting on your bed or a cushion, just anchor into your sits bones, drop your shoulders down your back. If you'd like to allow your outer eyes to close, you may. And give yourself a big, deep inhale. And extend your exhale longer than your inhale. And if it feels good for you, I'd like to invite you to put one hand on your solar plexus and one hand on your lower belly. And you may repeat to yourself inside or out loud, I am here. I am now. I matter. The root chakra mantra, I am here. I am now. I matter. Feeling yourself centered in your body, whole in your body, home in your body. And whenever you need it, as we go through this information, this is here for you. Both hands on your belly, the mantra, the noticing of your feet on the floor or your sits bones in the chair. Over and over again, we can always return to home within ourselves. One more big deep breath. And if you want to like stick your tongue out, work your jaw, roll your shoulders, give yourself a little wiggle. All of those things are good. Oh my gosh, I think all the paper's printed. Look at God. Okay, so the next thing I want to say, the next bit of business I want to attend to is that my foundational belief in my work is that everything is healable. Everything is figure outable, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done, no matter what you've experienced. I have seen people not only survive, but thrive from some of the most heinous things any human being can ever experience. Everyone has trauma, everyone has shit, everybody has some unhealthy relationship patterning. It is like just a part of the human condition. And everything is figure outable. Everything is healable. You can recover from anything. So if any of the information that I'm sharing feels confronting or startling, or you just see yourself reflected in it and you want to hide, just know that everything is healable. And so as we get more and more honest with ourselves, as we look more deeply into our own shadows, our own past, our own behaviors, our own weirdness, our own fucking just messy, imperfect humanness, that we're looking at it with the belief that we can heal it, that we can recover from it, that every single thing we go through becomes our strength, our magic, our testimony. We are able to alchemize and transmute everything. You are all very powerful sorcerers. Some of you I know personally, and some of you I'm just meeting, but I know for sure if you're here, you are a very powerful sorcerer and sorceress, wizard, that you can transmute and alchemize anything, always. So give yourself grace, give yourself compassion. Nothing that's presented here is designed to attack, even though sometimes when we look at information, we're like, oh, hashtag attacked, but no, hashtag called in, hashtag give yourself grace, hashtag radical compassion. Write down questions as they come. I'm going to take a couple of pauses for questions, but if as we're going, you have questions, concerns, comments, things you don't want to forget, if I see you looking down or frantically scribbling or like even typing notes on your phone, I won't be offended. So yeah, and if I see comments in the chat, I'll try to hop in to the chat. Okay, so we're going in. The main toxic relationship patterns I'm going to talk about today are codependency and fantasy addiction. And I'm talking about those ones because they're my favorite. No, because they're the ones that I have had personally and have dealt with personally. I will be using a lot of language from addiction recovery. So if you hear me talking about things that are parallel to substance addiction, like a lot of my recovery work has been in both CODA, Al-Anon, which is like family program, and I've also done Love Addicts Anonymous. So I've done 12-step for both of these things and therapy for both of these things. But I want to say that I struggled really deeply. I had complete boundarylessness, and I had fantasy love addiction, which we're going to get into, for a majority of my life, like until I was in my early 30s. And I've been in a lot of therapy. Like, Megan knows, because she's been here with me and my friends when, like, we've talked about therapy, and like, we're all like, oh, what kind? Have you done EMDR? Have you tried blah, blah, blah? Have you tried NLP therapy? Have you tried, like, we are like therapy connoisseurs. I have been in and out of a therapist's office since I was like 7 years old. And it wasn't until I had an addiction-informed therapist in my early 30s that anyone identified love addiction and codependence in what I was going through. So I think it's a really important lens, because that really helped me understand that the things that I was struggling with were, I'm going to get into where they form from, but that they were like predictable outcomes of my childhood experiences, and that there was like a formula for healing them that worked, that other people had been through, which I found very relieving. I'm like, oh, great. Like, there's a name for it and we know how to fix it. Fucking thank God. Like, it's not just me. I'm not just nuts. This is a thing that like has a predictable way to treat it. And that was very helpful for me. I will, like, trigger warning a little bit. I will talk a little bit about substances when I parallel some of this stuff. And at the end, there will be a little bit of talk about like stalking violence and both self-harm and partner violence, because that is a very unfortunate conclusion of a lot of fantasy addiction. So much like all apple fritters are donuts, but not all donuts are apple fritters. All love addicts are codependent, but not all codependents are love addicts. And so I want to talk a little bit about both of them. So codependency is an excessive emotional or psychological dependence upon close people in our lives. When we are in codependency, we're unclear on where we end and others begin. And we attempt to emotionally regulate ourselves through other people's emotions. And I'm going to get way more into what all of that means. But I want to just kind of give broad strokes. So in love addiction is a process addiction. Oh, wait, I like that better. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I'm like trying to move around the cameras because I still want to be able to see y'all. Love addiction is a process addiction. So it's like a food addiction, workaholism, gambling, shopping addiction. And so love addiction is an obsessive compulsive process used to relieve or medicate intolerable reality. So love addiction requires a healing from love addiction requires a path of detox, sobriety, and recovery, like substance addiction. So I wonder if you can even see already how they may fit together, right? You can see how if someone is addicted to relationship, they would be codependent. But if you are codependent, you don't necessarily have an obsessive compulsive addictive component to your relationship processing. So I'm just kind of like pulling those two things apart a little bit. So developmental trauma creates attachment wounds. First of all, everyone has trauma, and trauma just means any situation that you didn't have the tools to deal with when they happened. That's all it means. So there's no like, there are people who are like, I don't have any trauma. Like every single human being on earth has a trauma, and there's no ranking of trauma. It's just an event or a series of events that you did not have the tools, emotional, intellectual, physical, or otherwise, to process when they happened. Developmental trauma, usually we're talking about ages 0 to 7. Depending on who you're talking to, it could be 0 to 14 or even 0 to 25. I'm pretty generous. Sometimes I'm like 0 to 25. That's like when your frontal lobe is fully formed anyway. We're all just little soft babies up until that point. Codependency is the completely predictable outcome of experiencing alcoholism, addiction, abuse, or abandonment, either intentionally or unintentionally abandoned. So that could mean a parent who's away at work all the time. It can mean a parent in the military. It can mean an incarcerated parent. It can mean a parent who had to travel for their job, but you experienced it as a child as abandonment, or a parent who passed away. In our childhoods, nearly everyone has some codependent patterns. So if we're saying that codependency is formed by having alcoholism, addiction, abuse, or abandonment in your childhood, and then you think about just humans, that's like fucking pretty much most people. Love addiction tends to be born specifically out of childhood emotional neglect. And again, that can be intentional or unintentional. It could just be a parent who never talks about feelings. A lot of people experience childhoods in which your parents essentially feel like if your physical needs are met, then your needs are met, right? Like you have a house, you have clothing, you're good. So we can experience that, especially if you're a very sensitive child, you can experience that as emotional neglect. So it doesn't necessarily have to be purposeful in order for it to be a traumatic attachment wound to you as a child. Traits typical of both codependency and love addiction are frequently depicted in the media and in our cultural discourse about relationships as just being what love or infatuation is, right? So like being the ride or die, being Bonnie and Clyde, being down for your man, stand by your man, blah, 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 like all that shit. A lot of it is love addiction and codependence. A lot of the movies we grow up on, a lot of the love songs we grow up on, what they're actually depicting is codependence or love addiction. They are not healthy relationship skills. Pretty much no one is taught healthy relational skills in childhood. And I like to outline this at the beginning to say, uh-oh, am I frozen? That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not, okay. Have you noticed that when anyone freezes on Zoom, they do like a dance? Like you have to be like, wax on, wax off. Am I here? I keep freezing. Beginning to say that while these conditions are not our fault, they usually become apparent in our adult lives when the way that we've been existing in relationships causes us to hit a rock bottom and our lives become unmanageable. So if you've ever done any 12-step, you are familiar with that language. Rock bottom or my life has become unmanageable. That is usually when we come face to face with like, there's something going on and it's me. It's coming up in all of my relationships, not just romantic relationships. It may be coming up in my friendships, in my work relationships. There's something happening here. And it doesn't usually, we don't usually attend to it until it becomes unmanageable. And so at this point, I just like to say that while it is not our fault, once we become aware of it, our healing is our responsibility and everything is healable. Okay, so codependence, we're going to get a little deeper. It is extreme boundarylessness. Codependency is a relational pattern in which we derive our sense of happiness, security, and identity from other people's approval. If we learned that people reacted badly when we said no, set boundaries, or asserted ourselves, we may have learned early on that it's better not to rock the boat. If we had a parent, oh, that's a typo. If we had to parent our parents or caretake an addicted or mentally ill parent or family member, we also grew up in a situation where we were not able to develop boundaries because our well-being literally did depend upon the other person being okay enough to take care of us. For a codependent, other people being upset, annoyed, misunderstanding us, being angry, withholding affection, or threatening us with the end of a relationship is terrifying and intensely dysregulating. We feel the need for others to be okay in order for us to be okay. When we're struggling with codependency, we will try to feel and manage other people's feelings for them. We will find ourselves obsessed with what people close to us are thinking, feeling, and going through, and we feel like we have to fix it. So even if we don't feel like we're like obsessed with other people's approval, humans have like a stupid long period of dependency. Like we are literally helpless as infants. We will die. We are not able to just like, you could like sea turtles, like they're birthed and they just go live a life immediately. They do not have a period of dependency. We have a dummy long period of dependency, like a long time. And we know it on a primal level. We need our caretakers. We literally need other humans. And so if as a child, you had a parent who was not really able to take care of you properly, or you had to parent them, it makes perfect sense that you would only know how to regulate yourself through caring for another person, because your life literally did depend upon this adult being okay enough to take care of you. And so we can kind of see how that would grow into a boundarylessness. But the other thing in there would be if you had a family where you were not allowed to say no, where what it meant to be a good family member was that you went along with everything. If you had a parent who was violent or rageful or aggressive, if you just got smacked if you talked back, if you grew up in a place where you got punished for asserting yourself, and you're just like, it's just better not to rock the boat. It's better not to have boundaries. It's better never to say no. It's better to just go along with whatever anyone else needs, because that's the only way I'm going to get any of my needs met. So when I say this is like a completely logical conclusion, we can really see like how, as a child, especially like as a child, we don't have the ability to blame our caretaker. We literally don't have it. We haven't differentiated enough yet from our caretaker to do so. So we just think it's our fault and we have to manage it. I see people breathing, so I just want to invite you to do that. So if you struggle with codependency, you'll notice that if someone around you is displaying signs that they are sad or upset, it dysregulates your nervous system. So a lot of codependents are like, I'm an empath. And you're like, you're traumatized. So other people's emotions dysregulate my body. I'm afraid, right? And what I think that I'm doing is feeling your feelings. What I'm actually doing is feeling extreme anxiety because other people being upset makes me feel unsafe. And so I need to fix it. Like I need to fix it. This compulsion comes over me that I need to fix this for you because I can't be okay if you're not okay. So if you find that you can't fix the other person being sad or upset, you will join them in being sad or upset, or you will become preoccupied with being concerned that they're sad or upset at you, right? Again, which is just inner child. When you're struggling with codependency, the idea that someone is upset with you, angry with you, or misunderstanding you, or in any way, like otherwise disapproving, is literally emotionally debilitating. Like you feel like you can't do anything else until you fix it. Misunderstanding was a big one for me. Like the idea that someone was mad at me used to my day was over. I couldn't do anything until I fixed it. And I needed them to understand, which then gets into like us crossing other people's boundaries because they may want space or a break. And we're like, no, you have to fix it right now. And it's actually just us being unable to regulate our own nervous systems when other people have big feelings. And so when we say that this is about needing other people's approval, it's in a bigger way than just like likes on Instagram. It is a relational pattern in which like our physical sense of security in the world is derived from other people thinking that we're okay and approving of us. In healthy adult relationships, we can understand that other people are entitled to their own feelings and they are responsible for the consequences of their own behavior. We can allow other people to be mad or frustrated or upset. That's what holding space means. I can just be here with you while you have big feelings and I don't freak the fuck out and need to get into your life and fix it for you. We don't need to do anything. We can understand that if someone is incurring negative consequences for their own behavior, that is just their lesson to learn and their challenge to go through. And we can be like, damn, it sucks that you like got a DUI, but I'm not going to try to fix it for you. Whereas when we're in codependence, that we're like galvanized into action and we need to overfunction to fix things for other people because we are dysregulated by their experiences. And we feel like we have to shield them from the consequences of their actions. When we're struggling with codependency, we do not feel physiologically safe to allow other people to feel their negative emotions. So we will try to control the situation, or we try to absorb all the negative consequences ourselves. And we just say that like, we're just the strong one. I've got it. I can handle it. I can do it. They can't do it and I can. If our sense of self is tied to other people's approval, it feels unsafe for someone to be mad at us, disappointed in us, sad about a choice we're making, or otherwise upset. And when this happens, we will usually instinctually rush to do anything we can to regain this person's approval, including going back on our boundaries, backpedaling what we said we wanted, being like, oh, never mind about that thing I said I needed. I don't mean it. I'll drop it. We will, right? Because now we just don't want them to be upset. So this can lead to us spending a lot of time doing things we don't want to do, hanging out in situations that make us uncomfortable, participating in things we don't enjoy, suffering in silence, giving up huge portions of our life to make other people happy rather than doing things that would make us happy. Because this is formed in childhood, it can be difficult to recognize that codependent relational patterns are not just sensitivity and they're not just empathy, but they're an extreme lack of boundaries that is eroding our sense of self. We literally just lose track of what we want because all we can feel that we want in those moments is someone else to be okay so that we can be okay. And so we can't tell where our needs and their needs separate. Our codependent behaviors are usually subconscious, historical, and linked to our nervous system. So when we're struggling with codependency, we're actually experiencing fight, flight, freeze, or fawn when a loved one is upset, or extreme anxiety when a loved one is dealing with a struggle, or when someone asks us for space. And when this is happening, our rational brain is literally hijacked by our nervous system. And I'm really harping on that because I want us to understand this is not something you can think your way through. There's a body component. It is a nervous system thing. Like, we are in a trauma response because someone else is upset. And we just feel like we have to do anything we can to help the other person feel better. Can I move? Did I do it? Click it. I don't know. I'm gonna wait a second. I clicked. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm okay. You're okay. Here's where it gets sneaky. Codependents feel selfless. We tell ourselves that we're just givers. We're selfless. We love so hard. No one else cares as much as we care. I'll just do anything for the people I love. And a difficult thing to come to grips with in our healing is that codependent behaviors are actually a coping strategy rooted in control. So while we may feel like our desire is to help, our actual desire is to regulate our own nervous system. I need you to feel better so that I can feel better. And because I've lost track of where I begin and you end, I'm trying to regulate my emotional reality by controlling your emotional reality. So if I can absorb the consequences, then I get to control the outcome. So in essence, in codependency, other people become a drug that we use to regulate and stabilize our own moods. If I can make you feel better, I'll feel better. If you're happy, I'm happy. But the truth is that that's like a hit, right? So it's a brief relief that comes as a result of regaining the other person's approval. And that cannot outweigh the long-term erosion of not feeling safe to have your own voice in relationships. Excuse me. So quick, wait, I feel like I'm missing a slide. Hold on. Oh, excuse me. Can you move? I'm trying to do something. I'm trying to talk to my friends. Huh. Am I missing a slide? Oh, okay. Here we go. Here's one. So, signs of codependency include excessive caretaking, controlling, and preoccupation with people and things outside of ourselves. So I want to talk about enabling for a second because that's what a lot of people think of when they think of codependency. So you might think of it only in terms of substance abuse. For example, the codependent parent of an alcoholic or an addict who gives them money and housing, repeatedly bails them out of trouble or cleans up their messes, makes excuses and apologies for their behavior. This codependent behavior is called enabling, but a codependency is a lot broader than that, and we may be unknowingly enabling many forms of behavior that are ultimately harmful for us in relationships. But enabling is also a strategy. And it's a strategy that we use to ease relationship tension that's caused by one person's problematic habits. So there's one person in the relationship who is doing things that are destructive, and then we excessively caretake and enable that behavior to keep going rather than holding that person accountable, usually because that person is incapable of being accountable and we're incapable of leaving for whatever reason. So I like to think about enabling in terms of who in a relationship incurs and experiences the consequences. In a codependent relationship, one partner pretty much always absorbs the consequences while the other partner is always spared experiencing the consequences. So, for example, if someone repeatedly says demeaning things that cut you down after being told this thing hurts you, a reasonable consequence for that behavior would be that you stop talking to that motherfucking person. But they might not like that, and that might hurt their feelings. Now, this is the consequence for that person's behavior, and they might need to experience that consequence for their own growth and healing. That might be part of their journey. They need to lose you in order to grow. But okay, so a healthy outlook would be that, like, while that might be sad or disappointing, we understand that this is that person's journey and that we cannot sacrifice our health or our safety or our sanity to stay in connection with them when they're speaking to us in a way that we can't abide. But when we're struggling with codependency, we might shield them from that consequence in order to spare them from having to endure any pain, or in order to keep them from being upset with us, or to keep their approval. So we begin to prioritize their well-being over our own. In order to stay in a relationship like this, we have to do these constant mental and emotional gymnastics. We are exhausting ourselves, rationalizing why it's okay, why the other person can't be accountable. We make excuses for them. We tell ourselves we're strong, we can take it. Maybe we misunderstood. Maybe they didn't mean it like that. We are like, they had a really hard childhood, and we're just going through all of these things to try to, like, make it okay that we are absorbing the consequences of this person's behavior for them. And meanwhile, we are shrinking our personality and our emotional needs into smaller and smaller boxes. And we are just determined to, like, need less. I'll just need less. I'll just handle it myself. I'll go to therapy and deal with the consequences of this while this person just keeps acting like this. We make excuses for them. We lie to ourselves and other people about their behavior. We think things like, oh, they've just been through so much, I can't leave them. I know I can handle this behavior, but they can't handle me leaving. I can count on myself, but they can't handle being alone. If I leave, it'll crush them, right? So it's martyry when we look at it. Like, we think we're being selfless again, but really we're, like, painting ourselves as this person's higher power. We may also continually display the type of care that we want to receive in relationships while silently expecting that the other person will eventually reciprocate or realize one day how much we've done for them, while experiencing ongoing pain when they don't seem to pick up the hints. And this is passive-aggressive overfunctioning. And it is a hallmark codependent behavior, right? Like, I'm just giving you all this stuff waiting for you to one day realize how great I am, and that, like, that it's always been me, and that I've always been the one who's held you down and done all this stuff for you. And one day you're just going to turn around and you're going to be like, oh, it's been you all along. And they're going to become this great partner. It's usually not happening. People who are happy to take are just happy to take. And they're like, oh, she just gives it. She never seems to fucking care. They, whoever, he, she, this is not she specific. As much as it may hurt to acknowledge, all of these behaviors are enabling. Enabling behavior can also include bailing the other person out of drama or financial problems, repeatedly giving them another chance, ignoring problems, accepting excuses, always being the one to fix the problem, always being the one to apologize, constantly coming to the rescue. All of that is enabling. When we do this, we don't only wound and diminish ourselves, but we actively prevent the other person from experiencing opportunities for their growth and healing, right? Again, like, we don't usually heal until our shit becomes unmanageable. So when we're codependent and we're shielding other people from consequences, they don't get to have that rock bottom moment that makes them go, fuck, like my relationships keep ending this way. I need to do something about it. And so sometimes I think it's important to look at how, like, we are in some ways, when we're doing this, denying other people their growth opportunities, because we're not just like being like, yeah, you fucked up, buddy. Like, sorry, you're going to have to deal with losing me. Okay, so last thing about this, because I did my slides out of order. Let me see. You're out of order. Okay. Control. No. Okay. So I said something about control. That is a strategy about control. So when we're struggling with codependency, we might have stories that say, I always do more for other people than they do for me. I always give more than other people. People only contact me when they need things from me. Like, usually when you're a codependent, you have this feeling that, like, you're the giving friend. You're the friend who does everything for everyone. In every relationship, you're the one who gives the most. We might have persistent feelings of dissatisfaction in our relationships, not just romantic, but across the board, and feel like we're surrounded by users and people who take advantage of our kindness. We may have this story that, like, we're so nice and nothing bothers us, and it's really hard for things to get to us until one day we, like, blow up at people or cut them off. I used to be the queen of this. Everything would be fine until I'd blow up at someone and cut them off. They would get, like, an email bomb from me outlining all the ways that they were fucked up. But it was really because I had not spoken my boundaries until, like, I was building silent resentment and waiting for them to wake up to all the ways that I was overgiving and reciprocate. So because we've lost track of where we end and other people begin, we get fixated on other people needing to change in order for us to heal. And so we're like, if this person could just do what we need them to do, if they could just stop doing this thing that hurts me, if they could just stop drinking, if they could just go to therapy, if they could just do this thing that I want them to do, then I'll be okay. And then I can finally be happy, and then I can heal. Which also means we're always the victim. We're always the giver. We're always the martyr. We're always the helper. We're always the one who does for others and is left wanting. And we lose track of the fact that the only person we have any ability to truly control, protect, or heal is ourselves. So I feel like this is a nice place to pause, because that's a lot. And I just want to check in and ask if this explanation of codependency sheds any light on your relationship experiences, if there's been any ahas so far, and how are you feeling in your. Let's talk about love addiction, which I pretty much will refer to as fantasy addiction from here on out, because it's more accurate. Sad little Canva guys. Oh, sad Canva. They're having a hard day. I've had that day. Okay, so I called love addiction codependency plus, or spicy codependency. I was like trying to make this fun. I was like, I'm an asshole. Okay, I'm sorry. So the love addict, and I said love in quotes because it's not actual love. You're actually addicted to a fantasy. We're going to get into it. The love addict struggles with codependency and then chooses addictive behaviors and internal processes to compensate. We don't actively choose it. We don't know we're choosing it. Usually starts when we're kids. The actual addiction is the fantasy. So we're not really addicted to the person. The potential or idealized image of the object of our affection or the relationship itself is the thing that we're addicted to. So we're not really addicted to that person so much as the idea of the person or what we think that relationship could be in our life. Hold on, I just realized there's comments and I didn't see them. I want to make sure I can get them. Yes, seriously, I thought that shit was normal, right? It is normal. It is normal. That's the problem. It is normal. Doesn't mean it's natural or healthy. Okay. So the addict seeks to enmesh, right? So enmeshment relationships versus interdependent healthy relationships is a hallmark of this. We literally want to blend into another person rather than build a healthy interdependent relationship. Underneath this is both a fear of abandonment and a fear of healthy intimacy, but we don't usually know that we have that second part. We think we want healthy intimacy, but we are like deeply afraid of being seen. And like, just like with codependence, like there's all of this stuff about control. Like I don't actually want to be all the way vulnerable. I don't actually want to give up control. If I'm in a relationship with a healthy partner, they're going to like hold me accountable for my shit, and I'm going to have to be vulnerable, and I'm going to have to open up. But in this relationship where the other person's kind of a mess and I'm taking care of everything, I actually secretly emotionally have the upper hand. Side lecture. But so we think we want healthy intimacy, but we're really afraid of it. So when a codependent corrects their behavior, they can manage their life. The love addict has the bonus fun of going through severe withdrawal symptoms during this process, because detoxing from fantasy requires coming back into a relationship with reality that we've been avoiding. Ew. So the way that this is like, it's right. Again, it is not different from a substance addiction, from a gambling addiction, right? This is something I'm addicted to this fantasy, and I use it to check out of reality and not deal with the world. So in order to detox from this, I have to start feeling my real feelings. I have to start actually attending to what's going on with myself. And you're going to go through withdrawal. You're going to have like this detox feeling of like, oh shit, there's all of these things that I've been avoiding. So that's why I call it Codependency Plus. Love addicts did not bond well with their original caregivers when they were young. And so they experience that as a serious sense of abandonment. And again, when we're kids, we don't have the capacity to blame our caregivers for neglect or abuse. We blame ourselves. So if we have a neglectful parent, or we're not getting our emotional needs met, we internalize that message as we are unlovable or worthless. And that's why people won't care for us. And this kind of neglect, it creates this sense of like early loss and creates low self-esteem and this exaggerated sense of longing, just overwhelming desire for someone to love us and care for us and give us things and have our needs met. When we're in a love addicted state, our emotional needs are immense, and we have this enormous fear about being left, but we also have an enormous fear about our own ability to connect emotionally, because when you think about it, if my greatest fear is abandonment, then my other greatest fear is attachment, because if I get too close to you and you lose me, I think I'll be crushed and I don't know if I'll be able to handle it. So we compensate in love addiction for a lack of nurturing as children by immersing ourselves in fantasy. And this usually starts very, very young. I was in love with Ryan Tibbs when I was 3 years old. He lived next door. And from there on out, like my entire diary is just like one person to the next that I was in love with. And it was my escape, right? I started doing drugs. I was 8 when I started doing drugs, right? So I was very young when I started using substances for escape, but I was much younger than that when I started using fantasy to escape. I could be in my own world and thinking about what the other person was doing, what they were thinking, what they thought about me, like fantasizing about like, I was 5 and I was like ready to move to New York. I was like, I'm out of here. Looking around at the adults in my life, I was like, nope, I'm out, right? So the fantasy of I'm going to get away from all this is usually projected into a romantic partnership, and getting high from that fantasy becomes your escapist habit. It is not all in your head. So once again, getting into the nervous system part of this. When a love addict engages with their fantasy, they get high. Endorphins are released into their system, relieving their emotional pain. But I also want to say this doesn't mean that the fantasy is always a pleasurable fantasy or a positive fantasy. And the high, after a while, becomes the norm. So just like, right, like I'm addicted to coffee. At this point, I don't get a high from caffeine most of the time. I just need it to be normal. So it's like coffee's pleasurable, but it's also just part of my routine. And if I don't have it, I get headaches. I don't feel right. I don't have focus and energy. I need this substance to normalize. The same thing happens in a process addiction. So you need the hit of your fantasy just to feel normal, and you're using fantasy to regulate. So this can mean obsessively thinking about the person or the relationship, looking at the person's social media, contacting them, driving by their house, showing up at work. Like all of those things are like, I need a hit. And so I like to I want to parallel this, because again, it's not just a thing you can think through. There is a physiological addictive component that is going into this. So when I When people talk about like in love addiction, people talk about getting sober from love addiction. It's a real thing. Like any substance can be used as a drug. Anything. People are weird. Anything can be used as a drug. So like we're using fantasizing about relationships or other people as an escape from reality. And there is a detox period and like an endorphin thing that's happening in there. Love addicts begin relationships from a deficit. So because we are unparented by our inner parent at this point as adults, we don't love ourselves. We are using partnership to fill a void. We don't feel inherently worthy of love. So we start relationships by trying too hard to please and connect. We're like over delivering in this relationship. So you can see how this sets up a codependent relationship as well. I'm driven to find someone to tell me I'm lovable and to make me feel loved and to fill all of these voids in me. I want someone who like is rescuing me from my loneliness, my emptiness, my lack of self-love, my inability to feel safe in the world. I want a relationship that's going to make me feel whole. And so we're already on dangerous ground anytime we're entering a relationship looking for someone else to fill a deficit within us. It makes us vulnerable to being taken advantage of because we're coming in needy. We're not coming in on equal footing. Meet love addict, codependent, meet the avoidant narcissist. Love addicts and codependents are often attracted to avoidance addicts and narcissists. Avoidance addicts are not available for a relationship, even if they pretend to be or long to be. And I don't want to go too deep into the avoidance addict, but it is another thing on the spectrum. And in SLA, they call it love anorexia, is like on the spectrum of love avoidance. It's an attachment style. I think Lila will get more into attachment theory with y'all. Yes, definitely true in professional platonic community relationships too. Absolutely. So the avoidant is like, they're not just an asshole. I just want to like say this, both avoidance and narcissist is also formed during childhood trauma, and the codependent and the narcissist, there's like a split off where they could go either way. So they are a mirror of each other's wounding. But I just like to say like avoidance are not just dicks. Like this is their childhood wounding coming out as avoidance, whereas like the love addict's childhood wounding comes out as obsession. So they do want to be with people. They do they do want a relationship, but they don't know how to do that the same way the obsessive doesn't know how to do that. So the avoidant is often focused on addictions such as drug and alcohol use, work, or sexual affairs. So again, seeing how that is a great setup for a codependent relationship. If you're a love addict and you find an avoidant alcoholic, you're like, this is perfect. I'll just obsess over you and take care of you and worry about what you're doing all the time to avoid my life. Great. Narcissists are especially alluring to love addicts because they are the best, hands down the best, at creating the fantasy illusion of love at the beginning of the relationship. Narcissists are, anyone who's ever been in a relationship with a narcissist will tell you the first 3 months of that relationship is the best relationship they ever had in their life. Narcissist love bombing is A1. They're usually great at sex. They're just charming as a motherfucker because they are getting you lured in before their true self is revealed. And they know they need to love bomb you and get you as hooked as possible before the truth of their personality comes out. So they are the perfect storm for the love addict or the codependent. Neither the avoidant nor the narcissist is available to be a true partner for a love addict or a codependent. However, they're exactly what we attract because they're exactly what we need in order to see ourselves. They are the other side of our wound coin. They are a mirror image of our wounding. So I call these people our healing aids. They're angels in disguise. They are angels on earth. They are put in our path to illuminate the way toward our own healing. And this perspective was really helpful for me to shift out of being angry and blaming and being like, if they could just fix their shit, I could be okay. Being able to be like, oh no, they are the match for my wound. And they're here to let me see, like, this is what I need to heal in order for me to have healthy relationships. Like, they're supposed to be here. Like, I have the perspective that every single person I meet is God talking to me. Every single person I meet is like here to reflect back to me what I need, here to reflect back to me how I need to grow. everyone is a master teacher. And so when we can look at the people who have hurt us the most as master teachers, things get really different in our healing practice. And definitely like my last really abusive relationship, like I consider that motherfucker a master teacher. It wasn't intentional on his part. He did no studying for it, but he is a master teacher for me and continues to be. So I want to invite you to take a breath. Shit's about to get real. We're going to go through the addict avoidant relationship timeline. So first, the addict is attracted to the avoidance addict or another love addict or a narcissist. Number 2, the fantasy is triggered. The fantasy addict feels high. They're like, this is karma, this is destiny, it's fate, you are my soulmate. The fantasy addict feels a temporary relief from pain and loneliness and emptiness and not mattering. They start to feel important and they start to fixate on their imagined future with this partner. They become more and more attached, usually too fast and frequently using sex. So hot sexual bonding right away, and they're just in, and they're like, second date, I'm planning our wedding. The addict begins to enmesh with the partner and they start showing more and more neediness. And they may think, I'm just showing more vulnerability, I'm opening up. But really you're starting to show this person, I need you, I want to be with you. Your jealousy is starting to show. The avoidant partner starts to move away, but the fantasy addict denies the reality of that abandonment and clings harder and harder to the fantasy or starts to fixate on how it felt in the beginning. This is where the denial starts. The denial protects the nervous system triggers of rejection and abandonment. So at this point, the person is starting to show their true colors, but we're like, I'm not seeing the red flags. Eventually the fantasy will get ruptured. The partner will do something undeniably bad. They'll cheat, they'll do something undeniably bad, and your denial has to crumble, something that forces you to have to see that they're not who you thought. At this point, the fantasy addict might rage, get hysterical, bargain, threaten, beg. They shift at this point into extreme focus on the partner. I must know what they're thinking. I need to know what they're doing. Are they thinking about me? Some will become like, they'll get stalky, right? And that may be digital stalking, but this is also like where people cross over into actual stalker territory. Obsessively calling and text messaging. Other people will endure like silent martyrs. They might call their partner's boss or coworkers or friends. I've been this girlfriend, or tell people what the partner did in order to gain sympathy. This is also the point at which you might start flexing on the gram, going on vacation with someone else, having an affair, trying to like show that you're desirable. All of it is extreme shows of neediness to lure the partner back, and the relationship becomes more and more toxic. At this point, the avoidant partner leaves or discards. They're like, I'm done. This is too crazy. I'm out. The fantasy addict then goes into withdrawal. The fantasy addict's original feelings of childhood neglect and longing are triggered, along with their adult feelings of the current abandonment. Pain, fear, anger, jealousy, emptiness, overwhelm, hopelessness ensue. Extreme intense depression and sometimes thoughts of self-harm or violence, and sometimes actions on that occur. Fear becomes anxiety and panic, right? At this point, you are in a nervous system takeover. You are in a full-blown extended trauma response. Anger becomes frustration, rage, or violent jealousy. As a result of this loss, the fantasy addict might also face a loss of income, their home, being a single parent, right? So like if you're a fantasy addict with a kid with somebody, or you live together, right? I have been homeless as a result of a breakup. And so, or I've also been in situations where I'm so overwhelmed during the breakup that I stop going to work and I lose my job, or right? Like these things, that's where this happens. Again, if this was a substance, this would be your substance use has gotten so out of control, your life is becoming unmanageable. The fantasy addict may be so overwhelmed that they go into withdrawal and jump into the next point of the cycle, which is obsession. But it's important to notice that this behavior, this obsessive behavior, is numbing their painful feelings. So rather than just sitting with like, this relationship's not working out, I'm going into like this full blown like drama around this relationship, and I'm focused on this rather than letting myself feel the loss of the relationship. So it is now like, it is the cause of my pain, but it's also the thing that I'm using to escape from reality. The love addict now obsesses over how to get the avoidance addict to return, or they dream about being rescued, or they fantasize about getting the next better partner, or they're just obsessed with like, how am I going to get you back? How am I going to get even? Or you shift into another addiction, like using food or drugs or alcohol to numb out, or you start compulsively engaging in sex with new partners to avoid being alone. That was another big one for me. It was like a breakup happened, and I would like immediately go out and hook up with a bunch of other people. The love addict now compulsively acts out their obsessive plans. So they're using drugs, booze, food, other people, burning their partner's clothes, keying motherfuckers' cars, going and begging the person to come back, threatening to or engaging in self-harm. And this is the point at which some relationships unfortunately end in fatality or jail or both. And it ends with repeating the cycle, either with the partner coming back or just starting over with a new partner. So a lot of times in a relationship like this, the person at this point, the avoidant person at this point does come back. And they love bomb, and the whole thing just starts over. And this happens over and over again, sometimes unfortunately, until it becomes too untenable or too violent to continue. And this is a break to look at kittens, because that's a lot. I felt like this was very needed. So we're just gonna take a second here. They're really cute. I like that they all have blue eyes. I feel like they're siblings. Echo just meowed. Of course she did. So the progressive stages of fantasy addiction and codependency are similar to other addiction patterns. And so I just want to say what they are, which is an increasing tolerance of inappropriate behaviors from others. Whether you're in a fantasy relationship or a codependent relationship, it never starts that way. And when people are like, why don't they leave? And like, it never starts that way. It always starts with the love phase. It always starts with it being great. And there's that how to boil a frog metaphor where they say, like, if you want to boil a frog, you can't throw it into boiling water. You start with the water cold and slowly turn it up, which is gross. And I've heard not true. But we like frog stew this situation, this increasing tolerance of inappropriate behaviors that starts small. And as we're growing an increasing tolerance of the inappropriate behavior, we're growing more and more dependent on the other person and on the relationship itself. And that might be like we move in together, we blend finances, but it can also be emotional dependence. Usually during this time, we're also experiencing a decrease in our self-care, mostly because we just start filling our time with taking care of the other person. And like we have less and less time to do the things that care for ourselves. We begin to cultivate a numbness to our own feelings, or even start to get confused about what our own feelings are because we're operating in this boundarylessness. We feel trapped or stuck. We feel helpless to fix the relationship, helpless to end it. Because we're losing our self-care and self-value, we're starting to experience increasing despair, disillusionment, and depression. We feel a loss of power and a loss of ability to respond. And there's 2 number 6s. Great. Confusion about reality causes extreme dysregulation and our behavior can become bizarre. Like we just start getting weird because we're so dysregulated all the time and so confused about reality. And then in the final stages, we are feeling abused and or becoming abusive ourselves. We can only see the fantasy. So we're so enmeshed that we can't see the reality of the relationship anymore. And we can't see our own immature, irrational, or offensive behavior, right? So it's not just that the other person is being wild. Usually we're being wild too. Like the drama just becomes out of control. But we're in this place of extreme rationalization and justification. So healing starts with recognizing that we're in control of our own reality. Shifting out of codependency and love addiction requires recognizing that relationships are co-created both the fantasy obsessive love addict and the codependent were in this bubble of like, I'm so selfless, I'm such a giver. It's the other person who's out of pocket, I'm not. So we have to realize that we have to change as well. It's not about the other person changing, becoming more considerate, learning better communication skills, or becoming more receptive to you. It's also about learning that you need to clearly state your needs, set firm boundaries and stick with them, walk away from relationships that aren't equitable or don't really enrich your life, learning the tools you need to emotionally regulate yourself so that you can hold space for other people to feel their feelings without needing to fix them in order to make them feel safe. And we need to get help. Like, we just straight, especially if you think you're dealing with fantasy addiction, you need to get help. And this thing about regulating your nervous system, you need to get somatic embodied help. Talk therapy usually will not cut it. You can't think your way through a nervous system issue. You need the tools to regulate your nervous system. So the last thing I wanted to say about relationships being co-created is that phrase, you teach people how to treat you. When you're in a codependent relationship of any kind, what you're teaching people is that they can behave in a way that violates you and you will accept their hurtful behavior. You will tend to your own wounding, be responsible for your own healing, and make it okay for the relationship to continue without them changing anything. You teach people that you will do all of the emotional labor in the relationship and do all of theirs as well. You teach people that your needs and feelings don't matter as much as theirs do. We show people that we will abandon ourselves in order to keep our connection with them. And of course, as we do this, we're bearing all of the consequences of our self-abandonment and reaffirming our narrative that no one cares about us as much as we care about them, which reinforces our feelings of worthlessness and depression and helplessness and hopelessness. And like, we have to stop doing that and start taking all of those cords and pulling them back and plugging them all back into ourselves. All of the cords we have out in the world plugged into other people for validation and approval and love, like, we need to pull them back and plug them into ourselves and become self-resourced, and start pouring those things back into us. Codependent relationships keep us trapped in unhealthy loops in which both partners are prevented from growing, healing, or changing by the way they relate to one another. And so I just really, again, with extending compassion and grace to ourselves, that like, we're part of the dance, and the only way the dance ends is when we leave the dance floor. There's not another way around it. And that we're allowed to, and that we have to, and that we deserve to get the help we need to do that. Healthy relationships are ones in which both parties can say no and be honest. Healthy relationships include mutual respect and a safe space for everyone to have their own emotions rather than trying to make both people think and feel the same way. Healthy partners can hold space and offer support for each other as they experience difficult emotions. If that is not possible in a relationship, the healthiest thing to do may be to extremely limit the scope of that relationship or to end it. And that's in the case of it being a family member or someone where you're like, I can't, if it's like a co-parent, I can't not talk to you, but I might need to extremely limit the scope. Sometimes love for someone is accepting that they are their own person, their behaviors have consequences in their relationships, and the most honoring thing you can do for another adult is allow them to experience those consequences for themselves rather than trying to absorb or manage them or prevent them from happening. Bye. Okay, thanks. Bye. Okay.